Conversation analysis, CA, is a method for analyzing people's word choices. How do we define ideas, and how do we make sense of everyday events? I'll first explain the most basic principles, and then I'll apply them on interview excerpts. By the end of this video, you'll be able to use these principles to have a deeper look at your own daily conversations. CA is style over substance, how over what. If a person tells you how their day went, CA is concerned with how this person frames the different events of the day. It's not concerned with the events themselves. The premise is that language is meaningful and should be analyzed as such. First and foremost, CA is case-based, meaning it looks at each specific conversational context. We can't point to a certain word and say that it always means this in all of the contexts it appears. We need to look at each individual context. The most basic concept within CA is the concept of adjacency pairs. An adjacency pair consists of a first pair part and a second pair part. The first pair part warrants and even demands the second pair part. This could be a question-answer exchange. When we ask a question, we expect an answer in return, and when we praise somebody, we expect the other person to react to the praise we just gave. Requests and assessments also demand a second pair part response. Transition relevance plays is another basic principle. This is where it's required that one of the speakers takes the turn to speak. Again, this could be a question-answer exchange. There's a transition relevance plays because the first pair part now expects a second pair part answer. Sometimes we're able to decode that it's our turn to answer simply by hearing the first pair part's intonation. As we see here, this is not a grammatical question. This is not an interrogative formulation. Still, we know it's our turn to speak. In CA, it also matters how fast we respond to each other's statements. This has to do with pauses. Most answers occur within 2 seconds of the question. Sometimes we need more time to answer because the other speaker has said something we disagree with, and we have to find the right words to express our disagreement politely. Because in face-to-face interactions, we as human beings are governed by a set of politeness rules. We often apply these rules subconsciously. So if there's a longer pause, this can be a sign of absent cooperation in the conversation. I've done studies on reality shows, why people watch them, and why companies keep making them. This is me interviewing one of the hosts of a reality show that portrays the participants as unable to make responsible decisions, financially as well as morally. I ask her if this portrayal corresponds to her own perception of the participants. On a surface level, my question is uncontroversial. However, indirectly, I'm actually asking her if the show is credible. And the host reacts to these implications of the question. There's a 4.5-second pause, which indicates a possible problem source, that what I've asked her is problematic in one way or another. She says yes, but not unequivocally and unconditionally. An assessment follows her acknowledgement. Her assessment is then followed by the conjunction but. What follows this conjunction is the syntactically most prominent part of a person's statement. Just think of all the times we say yes but or I know but, which is a polite and frequently occurring way of disagreeing with somebody. Here the host's initial yes is undermined by first the pause and second the conjunction. So maybe the portrayals aren't always truthful. Self-repairs are reformulations of self-interrupted utterances. They often occur when we look for ways of phrasing our opinions more politely and hence indirectly. Here I ask a viewer of the same reality show why she watches it. She says it makes her feel better about herself, but then she starts a longer retraction process of this initial answer. Maybe because she realizes that it was too honest, too politically incorrect. She says, oh, that sounded a bit, and then the self-repair comes in where she reformulates the utterance. She then says, but it, and then makes a new self-repair. It's also interesting to notice how she's now making her initial honest answer part of allegedly multiple reasons why she watches the show. With you, she generalizes her experience so that linguistically, she's not alone in thinking like this. Another thing to look for is minimization. Here I ask a viewer of the same show if she personally learns anything from watching it. The first thing she answers is that she doesn't think it's given her anything personally. With the verb think, she's making an assessment. This is not an unequivocal yes or no. She moderates with the conjunction but. 3 points to this statement. First, she doesn't say learning, she says reminder. A reminder has a smaller scope. Second, she uses the adjective small to further minimize the reminder. Third, she says your own situation, not my or our situation. So she doesn't refer to her own life or her own situation. I ask her, it gives a small reminder. And once again, she makes an assessment by saying, yes, surely, I think so. She continues, surely, it's taught, but instead of proceeding with the concept of learning, she makes a self-repair and says this. She uses the pronoun you, not I, and thereby makes this statement impersonal. Her way of phrasing her answer suggests that she's talking about a general reminder for everyone watching the show and not for her personally. If we only looked at the content of what she said, we could be inclined to conclude that she does learn something. But dissecting her words with CA, we're able to reach a more accurate and nuanced conclusion. Within CA, there's a vast number of academic articles detailing the daily use of specific words and expressions. One of these expressions is you see. You see expresses shared knowledge between two speakers or more. It presupposes that we as speakers agree about something, even though this is not necessarily the case. It's used both subconsciously and deliberately to associate with other people, for social reasons or for self-protective and self-beneficial purposes, depending on the situation. Here I'm interviewing one of the participants from the reality show. He says he feels like the show portrayed him wrongfully. Then he says, you see, I'm one of those. But notice that I didn't know him before this interview. I have no idea if he's quote-unquote one of those that aren't bad payers. But his use of you see presupposes a shared knowledge between us, that we both know he's not a bad payer. When a speaker uses you see in this context, presupposing that something's true even though the other speaker has no way of knowing if it's true, it gives them power because it makes it uncomfortable for the other speaker to contradict said presupposition. Lastly, the concept lexical reuse should be addressed. This is a recurring phenomenon in everyday conversations and interviews. Lexical reuse occurs every time speakers reuse each other's words and also definitions of certain concepts. Most of the time, lexical reuse is a subconscious token of politeness to not disrupt the conversation. Sometimes we presuppose definitions of certain concepts even though we don't agree with these definitions. This is done for various reasons. To remain friends, to be perceived as friendly or tolerant, or maybe even to keep our job. In police interview settings, we should be alert to lexical reuse because the suspect could be using the investigator's words to avoid answering or to try to get off the hook. This is another study I did. I'm asking a journalist whether or not he's satisfied with the level of feedback from his superiors. I ask him if the feedback is made according to a general set of rules, or if the feedback is up to each individual editor. He then reuses my words, each individual editor. This is a quote-unquote innocent example, but if we were to look at other, more controversial contexts, lexical reuse makes us wonder, does the other speaker actually agree with what we say, or are they simply using our choice of words? No matter what, an example like this makes it clear that conversations are a joint effort. They're not simply happening. As speakers, we help each other create conversations and keep them going. If we didn't make continual acknowledgement tokens like oh or okay when our friend's telling us a story, our friend wouldn't tell us the story. And if we didn't let the other speaker speak, we would be considered rude. Interactional dynamics are powerful and can be used for both good and bad.